want to dedicate this show to the memory of Ann Simbala. Thank you for everything you did, Miss Simbala, and Godspeed. Today's show was recorded live at Paradiso, North Charleston's premier family-friendly social club. Dine, swim, and vibe with Paradiso. The restaurant and market are open to the public. For hours and membership inquiries, go to paradisochs.com or call 843-885-4663. Hey everybody, welcome to the Shrimp City Report. We are back in Charleston after our Florida trip. So we're here at the Paradiso Club, and we have today Andrew with us. Andrew, is it Kuhn or Kuhn?
Kuhn.
Okay, Kuhn. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Andrew is with Bulldog Tours here in Charleston, South Carolina. Welcome, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, as I said, my name's Andrew Kuhn. I'm the tour guide manager with Bulldog Tours. I'm born and raised in Charleston. Lived here my whole life. I've been doing working in the tourism industry for about 11 years now. I was kind of right out of my master's program. I ended up going into education. I taught high school juniors and seniors, government, economics, history for a few years, but then found my way back to Charleston and really just fell in love with this town all over again, just again growing up here. And of course, if you're a historian, we're better place to be than Charleston. So it was just one of those things that my love, my interest, everything that I had gone to school for, like this was the absolute place to be. And when it comes to giving tours, it was fun seeing people want to listen to you, versus from being in the classroom, getting a new class every couple hours. That was always a lot of fun. As part of it as well. But anyway, started giving tours, and I've done carriage tours. But then started working for Bulldog part-time doing ghost tours, and now I am doing all different types of tours for them and help training guides and a whole bunch of other tasks. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Tell us about Bulldog Tours. How long have they been around Charleston?
So great question. Bulldog, so the company started back in 2001, so 23 years now. And our founder, John Laverne is his name, and he went to the Citadel.
Okay, cool.
And that's where the name came in. We get all the time, are you Georgia Bulldogs or whatever else?
Yeah.
No, it's Citadel. That's where it came from. But he actually, very similar. He was going to do something different, but then ended up giving carriage tours and kind of fell in love with the industry and decided to kind of start a business. And so wanted to do walking tours. And one of the things that kind of how it first got started was actually through doing what we called our tour today that's called the Ghost and Dungeon, which is a 90-minute ghost tour. But the big featured site is that we go into the Provost Dungeon underneath the old exchange. And that's how it kind of got started from there. And so now it's ghost tours, culinary tours, and history tours are like the major umbrellas of the tours that we give.
What I find is interesting is Mr. Laverne decided to start this business from scratch, correct?
Yeah.
And then, really, Devin, where do you just wake up one day and say, I want to make a tour company? Usually it's like, maybe I'm going to get a boat or, something like that. It's like, I'm going to do something that sounds like a management nightmare to me.
This is early days of Charleston too. Like Charleston really is a hot capital of tourism, I think, in South Carolina now, but it wasn't always like that. I mean, 2000
was still burgeoning, I guess.
Well, one of the big things that kind of sparked a lot of it was Hugo in '89. Because you think about like Katrina and what happened in New Orleans and how many people were flocking to New Orleans to obviously in the wake of the damage. Hugo was very similar, that Category 4 storm and what it did, and people started visiting in droves, and all of a sudden you start to see that kind of shift in dynamic in terms of how many visitors. Now we've had visitors since the antebellum South, but in that what we have today.
Yeah,
It really kind of started in the early 90s. But speaking of John, I will tell you that he often will tell people this, so he probably will not be upset that I'm telling you this, but he founded the company to meet girls. So,
oh, wow.
That's what he tells people.
That really is a perfect way to meet girls.
Yeah.
You've been doing that. Where did you said you went and did high school. You were teaching school. And you went away from Charleston. Where did you teach?
Well, so so when I graduated, I went to Bishop England here in Charleston, and when I graduated, I think it is with most people that no matter where you grow up, you obviously sometimes want to go away. You want to get out of town, and I remember when I left, the place I ended up going to was Wofford up in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Yeah, know it well.
And of course I get up there and meet people from all different parts of the country, and they're like, "Where are you from?" Charleston. They go, "Why the heck did you leave?" And it's one of those things that I heard so often. But again, I would say, why'd you leave? Kind of thing. You want to get out. And so I went up there, and believe it or not, my initial interest was not in history. My initial interest was in math. And so I actually was pretty good in math. And then all it took was taking an advanced calculus class that really kind of pushed me away from that. But I ended up getting degrees in religion, and then picking up history. And that was when I fell in love with it. And so ended up going to South Carolina, for that matter, for my master's degree. And when I graduated, I always feel when you're out of school, you can't be too picky about finding a job.
Right,
absolutely,
right.
Especially in education. So with that, I ended up teaching in a school up in Columbia.
Okay, Columbia.
So I wasn't very far away, but I was up in Columbia for, again, in total with grad school and everything, it was about 9-10 years, and then that was when I decided to move home.
Let's think about Charleston right now, as young Devin was talking about. It's a travel destination, but it is 300 years full of history. You're a history major. You have a master's in history, for God's sake. So you know a little bit about that. In your experience, do you feel like you've learned everything there is about Charleston, or is there still stuff to learn? I mean, is it do you feel like you're still growing in your knowledge that you can communicate to tourists that come here and take your tours?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If you're going to ask me if I feel like I know everything, the answer is absolutely not.
Okay.
And I don't think that answer for any really great tour guide that should be the answer.
Okay, good.
Because it's like anything. You should never feel like you've hit the mountaintop, because it's when you feel like you can't learn anymore that everybody else surpasses you. So what's really important is that there's 350 years is a lot, and in different facets and whatnot. Now I will say one advantage I feel like I had was coming in, having studied American history for a while. I mean, I was able to have a lot of frame of reference to a lot of the things that
absolutely
were coming up, and the things I was learning. But it was so obviously you take that American history let's just say survey, right, of 350 years, and then you're narrowing it down so specific to a place like Charleston. And so it was a matter of do I feel like I have enough that I can give visitors a great experience for 2 hours? Absolutely. But no, I 100% do not believe that I know it all, nor will I ever get to that point.
It is crazy, though, just I guess what a highlight Charleston is throughout history, whether it's like Revolutionary War, Civil War, piracy, all that stuff. There's like highlighted moments that just somehow localize into Charleston, which make it such a big I guess history boon. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So you have so much material that you can you can draw on, and I guess no man could be an island as far as knowing everything, but it's pretty fascinating. And I guess what Dev was talking about with Civil War, Revolutionary War, pirates, that itself lends to you guys having different kinds of tours.
Absolutely.
What are some of the tours? And let's dive down into those. And the other thing that I do want to ask while we're talking to these, a subdivision of tours, are they yearly or are they seasonal or anything like that? So, let's have a little conversation.
Sure. Well, Our normal course of business, like I said before, was that there's the 3 umbrellas of history, culinary, and ghost tours. And the one that I would feel like has on our, if you look at our menu of like variety, it's in ghost tours, and a lot of it has to do with we feature a specific location on all of our ghost tours.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, like the Provost Dungeon is a place that we tour. Another one that leaves from our office downtown is the Ghost and Graveyard, which is takes you into the oldest burial ground in the city at the Circular Church.
Oh, okay.
And then we have a tour of the Old City Jail, Magnolia Cemetery, the USS Yorktown. So we have these like locations and whatnot. But when it comes to the daytime, which is more of your history and your culinary, the history, the main tour that we offer in the history realm is what we call the strolls, which is your general history tour. A lot of people who are, especially new-time visitors, they may not be interested off the bat on a Civil War tour or a African American tour or maybe a Jewish history tour. They might just want a little bit of everything, and that's what that strolls does. We hit on a little bit of all the topics so that by the end of 2 hours, you feel like you've gotten a great overview of our past. Another one that we do have that's a little bit more specialized is a tour south of Broad called the Houses and Gardens tours, because a lot of people visit Charleston. They see these old homes. They just want to go inside. And, of course, most of them are privately owned and they're residents. So you just can't go walking into residents' homes. But we do have a tour. We have partnered up with a couple of the house museums down there south of Broad.
Oh, okay.
And so we go in not only into their home and get an abbreviated tour, but we also get to explore the gardens and get that kind of element a little bit more as well.
That's a great idea.
So it gives people that itch that they get to actually finally get to go into one of those homes, and we go into usually 2 on that tour, and then finally, of course, the culinary tour. Believe it or not, the culinary tour came about because of a celebrity chef. Giada De Laurentiis. She was visiting Charleston a while back, and John, our founder, was giving her a private tour of the jail, and she kind of sparked this idea of like culinary tours, and culinary tours hadn't taken off the way they did, and so John ended up starting the first culinary tour. Was one of the first in the nation, and with that. It's a great way to kind of sample some local cuisine, but hear the connection with the food. And what I love, and I tell this on my tour every time, is because everything has history. I think sometimes it's lost. Like we don't think the most mundane things in this world. You get up in the morning, you eat a bowl of oatmeal. How boring can it be?
Yeah.
But like there's history to that. And so I tell people that food is history that you can taste. And that's how I always kind of phrase it. So it's kind of different dynamics, and it's looking at Charleston's history through different lenses. And that's the kind of, I think one of the great beautiful things about our city, because we have so much, there's different ways that you can look at our history. And so we try to offer those. And the other thing that we have as a capability is that, because there is so much about Charleston, and because we have the absolute best tour guides in the city, if someone calls and is like, hey, I want, the Revolutionary War tour. That I don't want to hear about anything else except that. We'll make it happen, right? Or I want a combination of churches and graveyards and just that. We can figure it out. So we can always custom make any kind of tour as well.
Wow, that's amazing. You have that leeway to do that, because think about it. It's like an a la carte menu if you want to, put together. The pirates or whatever. That's great. That's a great idea. Do people usually pre-book your tours, or do you get a lot of traffic from the hotel concierge? Where do you get most of your customers from?
Most of our customers typically obviously book beforehand. You're planning your trip to Charleston, right?
Yeah.
And people want to have things organized, and we want to do this tour and whatnot. And we often recommend, if you want to take a ghost tour, on Halloween, you probably should book sooner than later. It's one of those things that it's going to be busy that night, given what it is, right? If you're booking on a holiday weekend, it's typically going to be kind of busy. So we typically recommend to people booking out, for that reason. But we also try to make it so that we're never completely sold out, so that when those people do call the day of, or the people who show up are like, hey, I would really love to have a ghost tour, well, here's a few options and things that we do still have available. And so we do have some people who do show up the day of and things like that. Some people call, obviously they have questions and things like that about our tours, but most of them do book it in advance. And then concierges, we do work with the hotels downtown, and then of course West Ashley, North Charleston, anyone that is going to see visitors, to let them know what we do, and if a guest is curious, we can tell them about it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do y'all do anything extra for like the special events, like the Halloween tours and stuff like that? Anyone dress up in costume?
So we usually, depending on when Halloween falls, because like if Halloween's on a Wednesday, usually it's the weekend prior. That's usually typically pretty busy.
Yeah.
If anyone ever wants, guest-wise, anyone wants to come into a costume, we're not gonna, absolutely. I felt bad one year. I was doing the Yorktown one Halloween, and it was about 20 people on the tour, and everyone showed up, and everyone was in regular clothing, and this one gentleman dressed up like a fighter pilot, like a World War II fighter pilot, cool. And it was cool. But I think he was like, I thought more people were going to be dressed up, But as far as guides and employees, we do have one of those nights where we have. It's kind of our Halloween for the guides, that if they want to wear a costume or something, that they can come out and do it.
No, that's cool.
So,
cool.
Absolutely.
That's good. That does, that adds to the overall flavor, I guess, of it. And I can imagine Halloween must be just ridiculously popular. And the fact that you guys are going to the city jail, which is scary as hell, pardon my French, Magnolia, one of the greatest places, frankly, in the United States to just go hang out.
Sure.
And where else? The Provost Dungeon. I mean, you go to, and then the Yorktown. I've never thought about that. Wasn't the Yorktown sunk in the war?
So what's interesting about that is that the Yorktown that is here in Charleston, that is over in the Cooper River, is designated Yorktown CV-10.
Okay.
And the 10 is in reference to the 10th carrier, aircraft carrier. Okay. It was the second carrier named Yorktown.
Okay.
Yorktown dezgnation CV-5 was sunk in June of 1942 at Midway.
Oh, okay.
So the Yorktown that is currently in Charleston was actually still being constructed at the time, and they decided at the last minute to rename her to Yorktown to not only honor the first ship, but also to kind of confuse the Japanese. So it was originally going to be named the Bonhomme Richard or Bonhomme Richard, depending on preference of pronunciation there. But that was going to be the original name, and they just decided last minute to change her to Yorktown. And then it was launched in early part of 1943. So two Yorktowns.
That is so clever.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Yorktown aircraft carriers, there's just so much in there that I guess when the lights are dimmed and, you're telling spooky stories, that's pretty intense.
Yeah. And one thing I can say about the Yorktown, and if you've never done the tour, think about it from this perspective. Most ghost stories are going to be criminals, pirates, murderers. It's usually riffraff.
Right.
Yorktown is heroes. Yorktown is good guys. It's no one really tells stories of there's something evil that will latch on to you and never, that doesn't exist at the Yorktown. I'm not saying that it's not terrifying in those places at night and places that we go and things like that. And we've all had experiences in there, but it's a different dynamic because that there's nothing evil,
Yeah, that is a different dynamic. I don't think about that. And then, I mean, say that there's some kind of appreciation in that kind of a ghost story.
Yes.
That it's more of a legacy that you're actually being able to share in. I grew up here, and I heard the pirate thing sometimes, and my mom, my mom would tell me about Steve Bonnet and, stuff like that. But I didn't know until, frankly, we saw black sails.
Yeah, I've been going to the dungeon and everything, seeing like the animatronic light show and all that. And I've been going since I was in middle school. Yeah. But, something doesn't click until like later on where you're like, okay, apparently every pirate has ever been here.
Yeah.
Blackbeard laid siege, Stede Bonnet was
Yeah.
hung, and it's just like all these like figures sort of start clicking in your head, and it's just like, wow, yeah.
And of course, Black Sails, you gotta love. They go to Charleston,
Yeah.
yet Stede Bonnet's not in Black Sails.
Yeah.
Like he was never in the
Black
show.
Sails,
right.
we
Yeah,
watched
he was never.
Our Flag Means Death,
Our Flag
which
Means
is,
Death.
the other one.
That's
Stede
it.
Bonnet.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's Stede Bonnet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's in Outlander. He's
Okay.
also in Outlander.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need
Yeah.
to check that out.
Mhm.
Well, we digress. To that point, how did the tourism business do in the early 2000s when it was
Pirates of the Caribbean, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, surely the tourism business had to jump in Beaufort, Savannah, Charleston, wherever there were pirates.
Yeah.
The Bahamas
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, typically you go toward St. Augustine. You can go up to the Outer Banks because you can go to Ocracoke, which was Blackbeard's hideout
That's
spot
right, that's
up
right.
on Ocracoke and the Outer Banks. And then, of course, go all the way up to Boston. You had the pirates, Edward Bellamy, a pirate. They found, so last year I went to Salem up in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And I had never been there before. Of course, you think it's just going to be all witches, given, of course, Salem.
Yes.
But they have a whole museum dedicated to Edward Bellamy, and they found his treasure that was on his ship when it sank and he was killed. You find pirates all across the eastern seaboard, and of course all the way going down to Nassau, in the Bahamas,
Yeah,
because
sure.
that was
Yeah.
the haven of piracy. But they did come to Charleston. Blackbeard was here in 1718, and among others, but of course he's the one that everybody knows.
Yeah.
That's the one name.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's nice also mentioning all the different, options you have for touring, because that means the next Pirates of the Caribbean, but instead of pirates, ghosts, you're ready for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, having that wide option and being in Charleston is great for that.
Well, and I don't know much about this, but I can tell you, and I don't think I'm giving maybe a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't watched it, but of course the big show in Charleston right now is Outer Banks, right?
Yeah,
because
correct.
everyone, and we've had people come just to watch them film, and there's Outer Bank tours and things like that. But the last season kind of left it off with Blackbeard.
Yeah.
So the new season that they filmed that premieres, I think later this year, I think is going to be pirate heavy. So
cool.
I think we got to have some pirates
very
showing
cool.
up in Outer Banks. So
Very
we'll see
cool.
what happens. Yeah.
Question: Do
Go
you
ahead.
cater to the Southern Charm crowd,
That was
or do you just kick them out?
So what's interesting
your
is that,
battery tour, I bet.
Yeah.
well, we get 10 years ago when I started, it was a lot more questions because that was when it was a little more fresh.
Yeah.
Obviously it's still around today, but that was just when it was really first hitting. And of course, you get that question like, do you know anyone on Southern Charm,
Yeah.
or have you ever seen them around town?
Yeah.
And
How many
whatever
times
else.
have you asked, or has someone asked you about the Notebook or something
The
like that?
Notebook, yeah. And then, but the further you get away from it, it comes less and less. But we still get it on occasion.
Yeah.
And the Notebooks, that one was a lot more common. That one's kind of gone fade away. But a lot of people, that do know the shows, believe it or not, one of the biggest surprises was Patricia's house on the peninsula. Because when you
Yes.
see it, it doesn't look. People wouldn't think about that being in a city, like where the house is, but it's right smack dab in the middle of this Charleston. So
Right.
so there was a lot of people that were kind of surprised about some of the elements of it. But yeah, we on occasion still get the Southern Charm crowds.
That's what
and
I would
questions
think.
and things
I-
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be those Bravo fans that are all over it. When you get your tour guides,
Yes.
well, what's the criteria? I mean, what are you looking for in a guide? And what's the retention of your?
So good question. So when it comes to our requirements, requirement number one is just have a passion about Charleston. Obviously, and believe it or not, I have interviewed people who don't have it, and it's like you understand what this job is, right? You have to be passionate about what you're talking about because energy is. It transfers. If you're excited, if you think something's interesting, others are going to find it interesting. If you're out there and you could care less, they're going to care less, right? So it's like you have to have that passion. sometimes people think of like, oh, I don't have a history degree. Well,
Yeah.
most guides don't have a history degree. And you have to be willing to learn. And it's a lot. I mean, it is a lot, because with Bulldog, we have a pretty extensive training program. And because we're not going to put anyone out there who, depending on what tours they're hired to do, we're going to have making sure they at least have the baseline that they can answer certain questions or things that relate to whatever tour they're on. And so as far as, requirements, there's not anything like, you have to have a driver's license or whatever.
A certain degree
or whatever.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we do require is that, a few years ago, it was big news in the tour guide world is the licensing program. Back in the 70s, I think is when it was first instituted, but Charleston required guides to be licensed by the city. So you couldn't work or give a tour before getting a license. In order to get the license, originally what it was is that you had to pass an exam. The exam's a 200-question test, and you had to pass with an 80. And get an 80 on it. And then if you pass that portion, you then have the oral portion. And the oral portion, what it originally was the city booked a bus. And everybody would come out on the bus, and they would drive around. You'd randomly call your name. You'd stand up, and you'd have to talk for, I believe it was 5 minutes, about wherever you were. And you could be south of Broad. You could be in Ragsboro. Like, it didn't matter. You could be anywhere on the peninsula within the historic district, and you have to talk for 5 minutes. And you didn't have to talk about anything specific. You just had to talk about basically what was around or whatever, and that kind of thing. And that was a pass-fail kind of situation. And so then around the 2015, 16-ish mark, I think is when it was a court case came up in violation of First Amendment right of free speech. And while the city did its best to fight it, it was struck down in a federal court that you cannot, the city, the government, can no longer require the licensing of guides, but that does not prevent private companies to require it. So what happened was companies like Bulldog and whatnot, we require our guides to be licensed. Now, most guides who come or people who apply may not have it, and they're a little bit intimidated by it, but we train you for it. We actually prepare you for the exam. We teach you how to, we teach you the Charleston history to be able to pass it. And we have a very good pass rate for it. So you just have to be willing to do that. You're willing to go through that process. And now the new standard is the Charleston Tour Association, which is comprised of a number of different individuals and members. They all they form what's called the Palmetto Guild, and the Palmetto Guild is basically the new standard. Since the city can't require it, anybody who is licensed becomes a member of the guild, and we put that stamp out there on the companies and things, so you're taking it with somebody who's proven their value and that they've done the work and they are actually wanting to do it and things like that. So that's the big part. That's the hardest part of it. But the thing is, once you've passed it, you're done. You don't have to keep taking it if you don't want to. So once you take it, that's the big thing. So yeah, as long as you have the passion for Charleston, you're willing to get licensed. That's a lot of that's where it really kind of boils down to.
As a tour guide,
sure.
If I have to do like a area, are there certain points I need to hit? Like, I guess, how much freedom do they have with what they want to highlight or what they want to focus on within a tour?
Sure. I mean, it depends on obviously what tour. When it comes to, like, let's say the food tours, our company, we set the stops for the guides, so they're not just randomly walking into a restaurant going, can we sit down and eat today? Like, that's usually not what's going on. So, like, in that case, like, they have to go to those stops because that's the point of it. If you're on the dungeon tour, you have to go to the dungeon. Like, there's a few parameters, obviously. Exactly. If someone signs up for the jail tour, you can't not go through the jail. Obviously, there's some rules in it that way. But one thing I love about Bulldog is that we don't script our tours, and so
really
we do not script them. Now, that's not to say we don't give information to guides. Like, I want you to look, here's the story. But I give them, let's say, one of the most famous ghost stories in Charleston, Lavinia Fisher.
Of course.
Right? That's the big one. there's, let's say, 200 tour guides. There's 200 different kind of variations to that story. But when you start with it's a legend, you kind of have a little bit of that freedom. But I want guides to be able to have their own voice, their own personality.
Yeah.
And scripting tours does not allow for that. So while we encourage them, here's information, we don't require that they have to stop anywhere except what's advertised, obviously, for the tour. Yeah.
That's interesting that you mentioned 200 different guides, 200 different interpretations. I'm thinking, that would be a cool weekend that, Charleston. I had never seen a place that loves festivals as much as there's always something. But if there was like a tour guide festival where they're all telling their stories and maybe they're judged or juried or something.
There is the storytelling festival.
Yeah, if they had part of that, that's fascinating to me. Almost like I would like to take every tour with every person just to get the different experience.
What's the different variations? Yeah, absolutely. Depending on who you have, depends on where we believe that she was executed. Whether she poisoned gas, didn't poison gas, murdered people, didn't murder people. There's all those things that kind of fall in with the Lavinia Fisher legend. So, but it's like if you go to New Orleans, you have Madame Lalaurie. It's like the one story that if anyone knows any ghost stories, they're gonna know.
Yeah.
In Charleston, it's Lavinia, right? If anyone comes to Charleston because it's been on the ghost shows, it's been out there in the ether for so long. So yeah, Lavinia is typically one that everybody has heard of, but is more familiar with. So, especially locals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Have you ever had anybody on tour that was like, "Can you stop here?" Like, I'm sure it's not like on a subway or a bus where you have the little ding ding string, but I mean, will you accommodate folks if they go by a church and they're like, "What is that?"
Absolutely.
Okay.
Obviously we want to get people and our guests to get as much out of a tour as possible. And we all the time that we're walking by something that may not be something that we routinely talk about, or I may not talk about for that matter. But that doesn't mean that I won't. If you ask me a question, that I'm not going to. That's not on my tour. Like that's not what happens. And we still get questions. No matter how long you've been doing it, guides that have been doing it for 30 years, we still get questions that stump us. And that's kind of interesting. So, but yeah, we absolutely will accommodate. Now, typically, like take a ghost tour. If you were to stop on a ghost tour and point at a random church and say, does that church have a ghost story? You might hear, not that I know of, clearly like that. So there, things like that, because we still try to keep within the theme of ghost or whatever it is. But we absolutely will try to accommodate and answer any questions that people have throughout the tour.
Well, I guess that brings up a good point. When like a tour guide learns something new, like during the tour, or like a person asks a question and they're later like looking it up, like, oh, that's the ghost story behind that church. Is there almost like a spread of the information between the other tour guides? How do you find a lot of tour guides communicating like comes to new historical facts and stuff like that?
Oh, for sure. If we find out if there's something that gets discovered or found out, we absolutely try to share it. In fact, just Nathaniel Russell House, one of those house museums out on Meeting Street, it was in the paper last week, I think it was, when they've been for a while now been doing a lot of archaeological work, especially surrounding the old dependency of the kitchen house where the enslaved worked. And they are still discovering things, and they've discovered this, and hopefully I'm not getting this wrong in any way, but I think it was a bead that they were able to point back that it would have been actually made in Africa. So that means that it actually was carried by an enslaved person across the Atlantic and found its way at Nathaniel Russell and is still around. So, there's things that we're still learning, still discovering, and we absolutely do like to share it. Of course, we also share ghost stories, right? If we have something really good, a lot of people have got to know about it. And so, we try to communicate as much as possible with each other when, we either have something that comes up or we learn something new or, especially on big scales like that. So, yeah.
So the churches, what are the only what tours that you have that are actually walking, or so I assume the culinary, you go into the restaurants.
Yeah, they're all walking.
Okay.
In some element. Now the culinary tours, most of the stops you're going in a restaurant and sitting down at a table, whatnot. There's a few places on the culinary tours that you might go somewhere and are standing for a presentation or something, right? But that's the only one that you typically do get seating throughout the tour.
Yeah, that's so cool.
All the other tours, you're pretty much on your feet depending on the length of the tour.
Okay.
Up to 2.5 hours. Yeah.
Okay, I was kind of curious about that because I mean, Charleston in the summer is a little warm sometimes, so
Sure.
and it can be a hike around downtown. Although there's tons of trees, and it's a very lovely place to be.
For the culinary tour, do you have to keep it seasonal, like based off of just what's like local in Charleston, or how does that work?
It depends. It depends on where we're going, and depends on the restaurant. A few of the restaurants do change up a little bit based on season, but and one of the things about the culinary tours, we don't try to like double up on things. Like, so for example, we try to have grits on the tour because what's more Charleston than grits. So like grits, we try to get that on the tour.
Yeah.
So if we get grits on the tour, we don't want grits 3 times on the tour. We want it once, right? But one of our guides says this on our tour, and I kind of stole it. But she says that there are 2 things that will show up on your plate in Charleston, whether you ask for it or not, and it's pimento cheese and grits.
Yeah.
There's 2 things that just show up.
Yeah,
all
what
the
a
time.
pimento cheese resurgence we've had.
So
With
it's
Charleston.
one of those things.
What are a couple of the restaurants that are consistently on your tours that you want to shout out or something?
Well, let me start with Upper King, because we have 2 culinary tours that we do routinely. One is in the market area, and then one is on Upper King Street. Upper King Street stays pretty routine. Which includes Virginia's on King.
I
love it.
Yeah.
We do the Swamp Fox inside Francis Marion. We do Rue de Jean, 39 Rue de Jean.
Yeah.
And then we usually have a dessert stop at La Patisserie in the Hotel Bennett.
Yeah, cool.
And so those are usually the main stops for that
I
tour.
feel like you're just following us.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite burger in Charleston is at Rue de Jean, which is not what you would think would be there, but
Oh yeah, for sure. But they, we get shrimp and grits on that tour. They get pimento cheese, she crab soup. I mean, your staples, things like that. And I will tell you, and I have to throw this out there. My mama, she's born and raised Charleston too. I don't know if she had ever taken a culinary tour in Charleston, because like many locals, it's like, why would I? I live here, right?
Yeah.
But she had some friends in town back a few months ago, and to take them out of town, take them on, do something in Charleston, she decided that they were going to do a culinary tour and decide on Upper King. And she said it was like some of the best food that she's ever had. I'd never been to any of those places before, and so she loved it. And so I really love the endorsement from Mama. That's
for
always
sure.
good. But down in the market area, we have a number of partners. We partner up with Pugin Smokehouse, A2 Queen Street, another Broken Egg, Ruby Sunshine up on East Bay Street, Hyman's, Handy and Hot over off of Wentworth Street. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more.
That is a lot.
We have a lot
that's
more.
a lot.
And it depends. We have a few different. It depends on the day, because some partners, Oyster House down there, Spice and Tea Exchange we'll go into. It depends on day of the week, depends on what their hours are. Another Broken Egg is only open up until about 2, so we can only go there in the morning. You know, so it's like there's a few things like that we have to kind of, depend on the day, depends on the afternoon, morning. That does vary a little bit. Yeah.
Did like vetting for these restaurants too.
Sure.
It requires a lot of research beforehand to figure like what you want to make sure that, again, it fits with the history.
Sure. Like for example, one of our newest partners is Port of Call, where they that's the spot where Bubba Gump Shrimp used to be for years, there.
Yeah.
But they just, recently kind of redid their concept, and, willing to partner with the culinary tour. And while you go in there, and I'm sure they've got maybe a burger, burger doesn't really scream Charleston.
Sure.
So a lot of it is about working with the restaurants going, okay, well, what do we want to have featured that would fit in
I
with a
see.
Charleston or a
Okay.
Southern tour? So they get rice,
Mhm.
which is, of course, a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know how important that is to our history, and boiled peanuts. But you want to see something funny is take someone who's never seen or touched a boiled peanut
Yeah.
before.
It's mind-boggling where I'll be on like YouTube or like comments where like on Reddit where people will be like, "What the heck's a boiled peanut?" Yeah.
We one time I was doing the tour. We got boiled peanuts at I think it was Hyman's, and we sit down and they came out, in the shared bowl and whatnot. And
Yeah.
one lady, nice as she could be, but she took the boiled peanut, put one on her plate, and took out the knife and fork.
Okay.
And started going to town.
Yeah.
And it was like she didn't know. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so now I have to do a demonstration. I'm like, let me show everybody how to eat a boiled peanut.
Yeah.
And they're appalled that I didn't touch a utensil. I used my hands the whole time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a lot of fun. But yeah. And obviously, I don't think I don't know. Oregon sees a lot of boiled peanuts.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I guess not.
visitors-
The South there's distinctive food. Virginia's used to have tomato aspic. They don't have it anymore. I love it. That's super Southern. Just the rice. You bring up rice. It is super important. We grew it here. Carolina Gold,
Yeah.
And I think that brings up a good point as well, or a good transition. As far as like the amount of people you get internationally, what's their take on Charleston? Usually when taking these tours.
So the one thing I'll tell you is that a couple months ago, a private tour had booked, and it was a group of about 10 to 12 Canadians, and the whole concept of what they are was that once a year they all take turns picking a place,
Yeah.
and they don't tell anyone where they're going. They show up at the airport, they bring a passport just in case it's out of the country, and then the person who's that year says this is where we're going, and not one of them knew a lick about Charleston. It was
Really?
so funny.
Wow.
So they got there, they wanted a tour. They were like, tell us everything you can in 2 hours, because we don't know anything about this place. So what I have kind of discovered is that the more when it comes to out of the country, Charleston's not as much on people's maps, versus New York or LA or Miami or someplace like that. So it's really kind of interesting to see the reactions from international guests on our history, because they're just not as familiar with it. And so they're like really learning it fresh. But I will say this, the one way that you can tell definitely when international versus an American citizen is, when we have one of the oldest things in the country is 300 years old.
Yeah.
People in Europe don't
Yeah.
bat an eye.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
They're like 300 years, try 3,000.
Yeah, it is
whatever
weird.
is.
When I went to Italy, I was like, there's stuff here older than Jesus.
Yeah.
So, well, to that point, as far as international, do you see definite returns in advertising or marketing? And how do you do the advertising and marketing? Do you blast it across the world, the country? Do you mainly just
Put it in glass bottles and throw it in the ocean.
or do you have partnerships with all the hotels around here?
No, we actually have a phenomenal marketing director at Bulldog, and she's the czar. She's the one who does it all, and she has many years of experience in it. So she's well versed, and of course, obviously being a resident of Charleston, she's worked at the CVB and things like that. So she's very much in tune with our industry and knowing full well of what people want when they come to Charleston.
Right.
And so I don't want to speak for her too much, but I can tell you that but she has everything pretty much down on lock. And so what we do is, part of my job in relation with her is to make sure she has as much information possible to work with to put it out to the public. And because one of the biggest things I have to tell you is setting expectations. People need someone never takes a ghost tour before. They're like, what's about to happen? Are we going to see a ghost here? Like, what's going to happen? So we try to make sure that we advertise and set the expectations. And we do have, I think, partnerships with certain organizations and whatnot. But but another thing is reviews. Reviews are the lifeblood of this industry. So, honestly, one of the best ways of marketing is just through what people put on Google or TripAdvisor and all that other stuff.
Yeah,
for taking a tour. So yeah, there's a lot of different kind of variables that go into it.
a ghost tour, I'm going to go back to this. If 15 ghosts came to you and wanted to take a tour of just the churches or something, would that still be a ghost tour?
Yeah, I mean, if you have ghosts at home that you want to get rid of, we'll take them off your back, and we'll put them on our tours. Absolutely, that's no problem. But yeah, if someone wants to take a tour, dead or alive,
right on.
That's right.
Well, why don't you tell us how we can get in touch with you and any upcoming events?
So for us, you can contact us. So obviously you can go to our website, bulldogtours.com, and you can see all of our tours, what we do, our mission, and you can read about each individual tour. You can call our office 722-8687. Talk to our front desk staff, and they're very well versed in the different tours and experiences.
Okay.
And of course, we have an office down on 18 Anson Street, right off the market. And in terms of coming up, obviously we've got Halloween coming up, which will be very, very busy time for ghost tours. But one of the newest things that we have recently just launched, and I'm sure will be even more exciting as the weather starts to cool down, hopefully at some point soon, is we actually now have a new experience for guided towards kids, because sometimes clearly you go out there and you have maybe two parents who want to go learn some history, and then they've got their kids who are like boring, don't want to be there. So what we have done is that just a few weeks ago we launched Bo the Bulldog is his name, and so what it is you come by the office, and we have these stuffed animals. It's a bulldog. His name is Bo, and you can buy Bo, and it comes with a map. And the map is kind of a little bit of a scavenger hunt. And it takes you around to 10-ish, I can't remember off the top of my head, locations. Yeah. But it includes the market and Dock Street Theater and Rainbow Row, like some of the iconic places. And there's a question for you to answer. And it's kind of, there's a little bit of history kind of mentioned towards it. And if your child completes it, they can come back for a prize, kind of a thing that you've taken Bo on an adventure. So, back in July, my brother and sister-in-law brought my 3-year-old niece. She loved it. And they said, you think about like how expensive it is to do things with your kids, and it was like, just to go and do this was so kind of family on that kind of family budget. So it was one of those things that we were very excited to get launched now. So if you have some young kids around and looking for something fun to do and want to teach them a little history, a little bit about Charleston, and have fun along the way, they can go get Bo and take them around.
That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Hey, Dev, since Andrew is a fellow Charlestonian from way back, do you want to ask him one of our super old bonus questions we used to ask in the old days?
Yeah, it's a bonus question we like to throw on the end, especially to locals around here.
Sure.
What's your favorite way to eat shrimp? Especially since we've been talking about the culinary tour.
Yeah. So like step by step, like how to
or
to
just
eat shrimp?
what is
Just,
your favorite
your favorite method?
What's your favorite
style? I think you meant like how do you if you have boiled shrimp or whatever.
Your favorite way to cook it and eat
it. My favorite way. My favorite way of eating shrimp goes back to as a kid. My mama. So before GPS and everything else out there around there today, Shem Creek. Yep. There was, and I will not remember the name because it was from when I was a kid, but there was basically, when the trawlers would come in, there was like a fish market up there, and it was located, you had to go through the old village to get to it. Yeah. And she always said, no one will ever know where this is unless they know where it is. You're never just going to stumble upon it. So she loved it as like a little tight secret kind of a thing. But she'd go in there and buy a pound or two of shrimp or whatever. And then that night it was coming home, and it was literally boiling the shrimp, tossed on the table with cocktail sauce. Yep. And that was it. And so that has always been my favorite way to have shrimp.
It's boiled shrimps.
Boiled shrimp.
Delightful.
Sauce. That is it. Yeah. Yes. That's absolutely it. So,
well, cool. I think we're good here. I want to thank everybody for coming to the Shrimp City Report. Again, we will have this out soon. Want to thank Andrew from Bulldog Tours. We're going to encourage everybody to go to those, and we're definitely going to go to a few ourselves. let's hopefully down the road we can talk some heavy Halloween stuff when that comes around.
Yeah.
And once again, Bulldog Tours, thanks for coming, and good luck to the Citadel Bulldogs with their season opener this weekend.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew.